Channel 5 News, D.A.R.E. conference. So D.A.R.E. conference released 4 days ago. Let me fix my camera. Hang on. D.A.R.E. was a massive failure back in the day. It's the funniest thing. All they did was basically, I think it was meant to get kids to not do drugs. Just say no. Say no to drugs. D.A.R.E. D, I won't do drugs. A, won't have an attitude. R, I will respect myself. E, I will educate me. Some shit like that. But all it did was just educate kids that drugs exist and make them do it more. It failed miserably, but it's hilarious. And it's the most millennial shit that there is. I swear nothing's more millennial than D.A.R.E.
Said, quote, every drug user should be shot and killed in the streets.
But I do believe that we've...
And this, I think, is D.A.R.E. is trying to make a comeback. And he went to a conference. That's what this is, so.
Got to get serious.
That is the center and core tenet
more of a Gen X
their
thing?
Philosophy by associating drugs with violence. Drugs are not violent. Try doing some. Legalize heroin! Every drug should be legal. Ignorance is killing people. Poverty is killing people. Heroin is a medicine. Look up Dr. Barbara Browers. Dr. Barbara Browers is a physician and scientist in Switzerland using heroin to treat schizophrenia and other psychiatric.
It's a pretty strong medicine, though.
Well, yeah, but anything can be, alcohol is a pretty strong medicine, but yet we still can drink beer. You can have beer, you can have jungle juice, moonshine stuff, like we do these things and we make them so that people can consume them safely. People don't want to talk about oxycodone, don't want to talk about pain meds like that, and we need to be talking about opioids being more accessible and safe.
This is Haley, the only protester outside the International D.A.R.E. conference in Las Vegas, Nevada, where inside, hundreds of future D.A.R.E. officers are being trained by seasoned veterans. Like Retro Bill, who once told me, by way of a roll-in TV set in 5th grade, not to do cocaine or join a gang.
These illegal drugs are always bad for you. Marijuana is also a harmful drug. Say no!
Retro Bill, capital R-E-T-R-O, capital
Oh my God, he's still...
Also known as the International D.A.R.E. Safety
has
and
that hair.
Self-Esteem Buddy. Official title.
Hey everyone, I'm Retro Bill, your D.A.R.E. safety buddy. Cool.
We never know. You could watch a documentary on television. You can see a news segment on TV, right? You can read a book. You can read a quote, right? You can hear a speaker speak. It could be a teacher, a counselor, a police officer, a Retro Bill, and all of a sudden, just know this. Something will click for somebody in a positive way.
D.A.R.E.
What?
Drug and alcohol resistance education. Many of you who went to school in the 80s and 90s may remember D.A.R.E.
Just say no.
Get D.A.R.E. in your kid's school too.
So D.A.R.E. began in 1983 in the LA Unified School District to serve the inner city community of Los Angeles. But then quickly after, Nancy Reagan and Ronald Reagan caught wind of the success of the program, so it expanded to a federal level.
It's drugs, stupid. It's drugs.
And by 1995, they had D.A.R.E. in 95% of all schools on the West Coast. Their idea was to counter the narrative that was promoted by movies like Scarface and Cheech and Chong and Half-Baked to show that drugs are bad, not cool, and peer pressure sucks.
The target age group in the 4th to 7th grade, right in that particular age range.
This program cost American taxpayers $750 million per year until 1998, when a University of Michigan study emerged showing that drug use...
750 million per year isn't... I'm about to sound potentially ignorant. In the grand scheme of how much we spend in taxes, that's not that much, is it? Back then, it was a lot. Okay.
Actually increased in the time period that D.A.R.E. launched in 1982 to 1995.
It didn't actually work to prevent people from using drugs.
And so President Clinton abruptly cut 78% of D.A.R.E.'s funding. And for the past 15 to 20 years, D.A.R.E. has been in relative obscurity, often hiding in the shadows beneath the veil of its shell company, the Keeping It Real program.
Did you know that D.A.R.E. is now keeping it real?
But now, guess what? D.A.R.E. is motherfucking back, y'all.
D.A.R.E. is moving forward into the next millennium.
No more getting high, because it's 2023. Shit's all different now. You got fentanyl, all bad.
And we also have a powerful vaping, anti-vaping message that our officers are bringing to the schools.
So, D.A.R.E is back in this bitch.
D.A.R.E, right on.
The revamped D.A.R.E program will focus on the dangers of fentanyl and substance abuse.
To me, we have no choice at this particular time. Fentanyl is for real.
How you doing? What's going on, man?
Hey, we're good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you think's the best way to keep kids off drugs?
Love, care, knowledge, luck, labor utilizing correct knowledge, L-U-C-K. That's it.
Before I dove into the nitty-gritty of the new and improved D.A.R.E program, I wanted to learn more about Retro Bill and try to figure out what has motivated him to work tirelessly for over 3 decades as the lead spokesperson for D.A.R.E. Thankfully, Retro is pretty much an open book and was happy to tell me where his first spark of inspiration came from.
I mean, my
I
man's...
was somebody who...
Look at... Oh, I skipped forward on accident.
He was then, and they acted as if they're all bad.
I accidentally skipped forward. What? His eyebrows are crazy.
And was happy to tell me where his first spark of inspiration came from.
I was somebody who just constantly asked myself, what is my calling in life? Why am I here? And
they're dyed
when
black
I would go
for
out
sure.
and speak
Okay.
to kids,
That's crazy.
Elementary, middle school, high school kids, continuation high schools, juvenile detention centers, and letting kids know that those men and women that wear a badge are your friends. They're not foes. I noticed that there's a switch because it's easy.
Uh-oh. Am I still live? Okay, 4:52. Hang the heck on.
Ask myself, what is my call? Elementary, middle. I know if
right.
they're all bad and all they want to do is beat people up and throw people in jail. Painted as if they're all bad. A switch because it's easy to have them painted as if they're all bad and all they want to do is beat people up and throw people in jail. But I've had the luxury of these 25 years professionally to work with D.A.R.E officers in our schools, and I can tell you that group are in law enforcement 100% for the right reasons.
Your D.A.R.E officers are always there to help you keep safe, drug-free, and violence-free.
D.A.R.E officers?
Dare to care. Hey, let's hear your siren. Sure. Cool.
And by the way, I'm talking urban schools. I'm the only Caucasian in the building, and I know a lot of those kids are going home to tough lives.
You said
Caucasian.
You were Cherokee as well?
It's the only white guy. Let's just say that.
So, which is really important, and I hold that dear to my heart. But they're also going home in many cases to difficulties in the home.
Urban.
What I found, and I feel very fortunate, is that my message connects with everybody.
Right on, right on, right on.
I've got emails where kids have specifically told me, I shared the story of Jose. Incredible kid. But he was in juvie, right? And at the time I spoke to him, he was then, and they had him back in the continuation high school, but he was under investigating for a stabbing, dealing drugs, blah, blah, blah. And man, he just sat there and he was gonna defy me when I came to his continuation high school. And I knew he didn't want to let me in. He wasn't gonna let me in his heart. Because I also know that he's been let down by probably everybody in his life. So why is this dude that looks like Elvis going to impact me? And ultimately, he got up. He said, Retro, you got in my head. And I said, before he walked out, I said, yeah, and remember this. I'm in your heart when you walk out that door. 3 weeks later, he told me in an email that he got jumped out of a gang 3 days later after hearing me speak. Spent a couple of days in the hospital, moved to another city in the state, was living with his aunt, and they enrolled him back in the regular high school. Yes, he's still under investigation, and he's going to have to deal with his past, but he was on his way forward.
Retro Bill's anecdote about saving Jose from the Vadio by way of positive reinforcement versus what Haley said about D.A.R.E being a Reagan-era government psyop to criminalize drug users cuts straight to the core of this debate. Proponents of D.A.R.E see the program as a way to intervene in the lives of at-risk children with real hard talks about drugs and violence on an individual level to hopefully save them from a life of addiction and crime.
Walkie slash. These niggas claim 300, but we BDK.
Whereas critics of D.A.R.E view things from a larger societal level and see D.A.R.E as 2 things. First, a snitch program aimed to turn school children into voluntary police informants.
Get the police involved to help you solve gang problems in your community. Describe who you saw, what you heard, and any other details you can remember.
and second, a way to indoctrinate American children to associate drug users with violence, essentially equating addiction with criminality, which is the moral framework behind the war on drugs, a national initiative that began with President Nixon in 1971.
America's public enemy number one is drug abuse. It is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
But really kicked into high gear under President Ronald Reagan.
Drugs are menacing our society. They're threatening our values and undercutting our institutions.
Whose lock-em-up policies caused prison population to double between 1982 and 1990. Much of this increase in prison population came directly as a result of the mandatory minimum sentence placed on petty possession of one drug in particular, crack cocaine.
This is it. The drug so powerful it will empty the money from your pockets, make you sell the watch off your wrist, or kill your mother.
A drug that was allegedly sold at a discount rate en masse by the CIA to kingpins around the country, like Freeway Ricky Ross in Los Angeles, as a way to finance our covert war against Nicaragua's then leftist government, the Sandinistas, who we fought through our proxy army, the Contras. Another purpose may have been to extinguish whatever was still left over of black liberation movements after COINTELPRO concluded in 1971. Coincidentally, perhaps, the same year the war on drugs began. Another cross-purpose may have been to fill up the prisons by creating a new economy using slave labor by exploiting a loophole in the 13th Amendment. But perhaps we should back up a bit. I mentioned that incarceration rates doubled under Reagan, but that number then quadrupled under President Clinton, who in 1994 passed something called the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, aka the Crime Bill.
We intend to continue the fight, and we want you to keep working with us.
If you have a piece of crack cocaine no bigger than this quarter, you go to jail for 5 years.
The crime bill introduced mandatory 3-strike sentencing guidelines, meaning any third-time violent criminal upon their third offense would receive a mandatory life sentence with no possibility of parole. It also allocated $9.7 billion for the construction of new prisons, and of course, $6.1 billion for school prevention programs, mainly D.A.R.E.
D.A.R.E. to keep a kid off drugs. D.A.R.E. to keep a kid off dope. D.A.R.E. to give a kid some help.
Oh, fuck.
D.A.R.E. to give a kid some hope.
D.A.R.E. The initial curriculum aimed to keep kids off drugs by doing two things. First, by presenting them with terrifying imagery that explained how drugs affect the body.
This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?
The second part of the curriculum was based upon teaching them how to say no to drugs, often featuring live demonstrations about how to resist peer pressure.
Hey, you want to smoke?
No, thanks.
Oh, I'm gonna go tell everybody that you are a chicken.
Well, that's okay, Paul, but that's something I don't want to do.
Okay. Good.
And then after a 12-week school semester, students who participated would become D.A.R.E. graduates and receive an official certificate. Upon further research, I was surprised to learn that it was not the success, but the failure of Ronald Reagan's initial D.A.R.E. programs to reduce drug use and violent crime in the 80s that caused the Clinton administration to pass the 1994 crime bill, citing D.A.R.E.'s failure as their primary justification.
It's important that we also understand that a D.A.R.E. program by itself is not enough. That's the reason it's so important to get the crime bill passed with a balance of punishment, policing, and prevention that gives our youngsters a chance to grow in a strong, constructive way, and yet holds them accountable.
Throw that in the corner.
It's this connection that causes many D.A.R.E. critics to draw a direct connection between D.A.R.E. and mass incarceration during the war on drugs.
Well, so D.A.R.E. was formed as a extension of the war on drugs to put people behind bars and to make money and to separate people and to, you know, make it seem as if black people do more drugs than white people do, which is complete and utter bullshit. And the people at the highest levels of society, they're all doing all this stuff too. Everybody at this conference, somebody's got to, you know, whether it's a prescription that they're taking or whether it's something they get from their second cousin, like, you know, or whether it's their, you know, CrossFit lifestyle. We don't try to outlaw sex. We don't try to outlaw driving. We don't try to outlaw guns. We don't try to outlaw all these things that are that come with risk, but can be easily have these safety measures put in place, much like we do with like pharmaceuticals.
I know this is a bit controversial, but before we proceed, I need to also mention that the crime bill did, in fact, dramatically reduce violent crime. It actually cut homicides and violent crimes in half, and legitimately made New York City 7 times safer in just 5 years. And since then, despite what you might see on TV or read on the news, crime has been on a steady decline. I personally am in favor of radical prison reform and do not believe that our correctional facilities do anything to rehabilitate offenders. But I find that too often the conversations about mass incarceration are had in complete ignorance in regards to the murderous mayhem that gripped every large American city in the early 90s. Yes, the US government absolutely played a role in facilitating these environments, especially through residential segregation and urban renewal projects. But if you just look at the data alone and see that from 1960 onward, crime was only increasing, it appears that if something wasn't done, much like what's going on in El Salvador, violence only would have continued to escalate into the early 2000s. But that being said, I still think the Clinton administration went too far in terms of drug sentencing. Anyways, back to Haley. I wondered what brought her to such lengths, to travel all the way to Vegas just to protest D.A.R.E. As we continued talking, she told me that she was a drug user herself and began using heroin. After her tolerance to pharmaceutical opiates became so high, she turned to the streets for something stronger.
I'm an out of the closet drug user, as they say.
And believes the primary downside of heroin, meth, and cocaine being illegal is that it allows cartels and street dealers to cut and mix the product with potentially fatal contaminants like fentanyl and xylazine.
You know, you risk getting a contaminated substance because you can't get your prescription Adderall from the pharmacy anymore, or a prescription oxycodone. And as somebody who's had 2 back surgeries, like, I know what it's like to be like in dying, excruciating pain and have to go to the emergency room twice in order for them to.
We need like an early access like world, like a parallel universe where we can like test things. You know, let's test it out. Let's make all drugs legal, and let's like really big stores that sell drugs, and let's just see how it goes, and we'll see what problems come up. Actual beta testing. But like, what if you test it and it's, you know, catastrophic? Well, shit. Now what, right? I don't know.
To finally like give me anything stronger than Tylenol.
She also
Called
believes
Portland?
the D.A.R.E.
Okay.
program legitimately made drugs more attractive
Florida?
to middle school age students.
It's been sold under this guise of safety, when really like it just made people want to do an experiment with drugs more, which is now an unregulated system.
Oh, this guy
What do you
again.
think about D.A.R.E, Mr. Daddy?
D.A.R.E. I feel like it just kind of made me more curious, you know? Like, I'm like, where are these drugs at?
Damn, are those
When am I gonna be able to
polarized
say
Ray-Bans?
no? Where
This guy's
and when
got
am
money.
I going to be able to say no to these drugs, all these drugs? You know, I didn't even think about drugs until D.A.R.E. Yeah, D.A.R.E. taught me everything about drugs, really. I mean, they told me what it looks like. The only thing it didn't tell me what it smelled like. And then I did cocaine when I was 15. Do you want to do that? Because I got some coke.
Don't lock us up, let us get high. We smoke, we get high, we smoke marijuana. We like heroin, we like crystal, we like all of it. Let us get high. Stop hating, legalize it.
Have you been to jail just for possession before?
Yes, I have. All over. Yes, just for possession. I was riding, I was smoking, they smelt it, and they pulled me over. And I said, what's going on? They said, you smoking marijuana, you going to jail. So they locked me up.
What
For
state was that
weed?
in?
Oh, wow.
Tennessee.
Are you familiar with the D.A.R.E. program at all?
No, I'm not. Never heard of it.
After standing outside for an hour, casino security finally kicked Haley off the premises, and so I figured it was time for me to actually go inside, interview some D.A.R.E. officers, get some hot takes, get down to business, and figure out once and for all what the hell is going on.
Inside, we have 500 future D.A.R.E. officers who are being trained on how to stop kids from smoking that shit. So let's go inside, talk to some people, and dare to do some interviews. Come on, fellas.
Halt! Preset halt!
This is weird.
Upon entering the conference, I was honestly a bit surprised. I guess I expected a vivacious training session, but instead, it was more of an award ceremony dedicated to crowning the D.A.R.E. Student of the Year and, of course, the D.A.R.E. Officer of the Year, a man named Captain Gilmore.
Captain Gilmore does a fantastic job of meeting with those students, letting them know how these things can have negative impacts on their life.
Thank you, Officer Gilmore, for your dedication.
I think ceremonies are cringe.
Unlike Retro Bill, Chief Gilmore is relatively
Funerals
new
and
to
weddings
the
are the
program,
only ceremonies
but
that
was
make sense to
quickly
me.
able to rise in the ranks with his caring but no BS attitude.
I'm Chief Mark Gilmore from Kosciuszko, Mississippi.
Congratulations, man.
Well, thank you very much.
How does it feel?
Feels great. Hey, something I never imagined before.
Can you think of like an example of a moment on the job that you really appreciated?
Visiting with the kids every day. So I'm with them all day, every day, and extracurricular activities and stuff, band, basketball, football, baseball, all of those activities. I'm there, graduations, all of those things, yes.
So what does being a D.A.R.E officer actually entail, like day to day?
Day to day is basically speaking with the kids, basically teaching them about, some drugs, not much, but making healthy and wise decisions.
Unlike many other D.A.R.E officers who hail from big cities with big
boy.
city problems, Chief Gilmore is from Kosciuszko, Mississippi, a small, relatively poor town with 7,000 people, only one of which is a Pacific Islander. But aside from that, it's also where Oprah Winfrey grew up, and is genuinely a great town to visit. I suggest that all of you watching visit Mississippi. It gets a bad rap, but it's a nice place. Anyways, in your city, which drugs are most popular among the kids?
I would say marijuana is the most unpopular. Yes, sir. It's that gateway drug to something more serious, like your cocaine use and things like that.
As a D.A.R.E officer, are you allowed to arrest anybody?
Yes, sir, definitely, yes, definitely. And when I find drugs on a kid, an arrest has to be made.
Federal data from the most recent school year available shows 715 students 5th grade or younger arrested at school.
When you arrest them, do you take them in or?
Yes, I take them in, or either I call the local police department to come in and do transport for me. And I go ahead and do paperwork on them and everything, and I handle all that. They just do transport for me. Yes, sir.
Would you do that for any amount of drugs that you find?
Yes, sir, definitely. Yes, definitely. Yes, definitely. No questions asked.
Yeah. Even like a tiny little bit of weed?
Definitely, all of it. If it's drug, it's just drugs to me. Some are worse than others on the body. And but I think all of them are on the same umbrella.
I guess
Midway
if you're in
through this
5th grade or
conversation,
younger,
I began to
though, it's
understand
like...
why having D.A.R.E officers in schools has been such a contentious issue and is so criticized by groups that advocate for criminal justice reform. It's because D.A.R.E officers actually take kids to jail from school and process them in the juvenile criminal system, as opposed to the school's disciplinary apparatus, which is primarily ran by the principal, the Board of Education, and the superintendent, none of whom are required by law to cooperate with law enforcement in prosecuting nonviolent offenses, like drug possession. But the presence of D.A.R.E officers in schools changes everything. And for those caught with petty amounts of drugs in school, D.A.R.E officers turn what could have been a suspension by the school administration, or a couple hours in detention every week after class, into a criminal arrest, and maybe a juvie sentence, which is proven to have a drastically negative impact on the trajectory of a student's life, and quite literally airdrops them into the school-to-prison pipeline. What age do you think kids are most at risk?
Well, to be honest, around that 9 to 10-year-old.
Really?
Yes, sir. 9 to 10-year-old and up. And I've seen kids that I have actually mentored over fall into those traps of the marijuana game, and so it's very disheartening. And it's something that's very saddening to me, to my heart.
Why do you think people use drugs in the first place?
I think it have a little bit of both, of environment, that peer pressure that they fall into, which is very real, and it's a follow the leader kind of thing. They see others doing it, and those people have those influence on those kids that even sometimes adults and parents don't even have that type of influence on the kids. When someone can come in and influence your kids to do drugs and other things.
After presenting Chief Gilmore with his
I don't even know what he
award,
just
they
said.
said it was time to inaugurate the 2023 D.A.R.E Student of the Year and award them with a $20,000 college scholarship.
Our 2023 D.A.R.E Scholarship recipient is Lily Mullins.
The winner, Lily, is from New York State, and for 4 years has been the director of the D.A.R.E student program at her high school. This to me was particularly interesting, especially because her and I are around the same age, and she said she began advocating for D.A.R.E full-time when she was 14, which is exactly how old I was when I became Seattle's leading marijuana advocate.
And I'm cheesing, beefing, bleeding, sheafing on that CD heat shit, so better believe it.
I wondered what influenced her to almost take the opposite path, and how she resisted the powerful psychedelic sway of artists like Mac Miller, Juicy J, and especially Wiz Khalifa. What made you want to start getting involved in D.A.R.E?
So I think that the biggest problem children are facing today is mental health, and especially vaping and now weed. So that's definitely been a problem that we've been targeting. It's definitely increased in the last couple of years. That's why it's been a larger problem that D.A.R.E's been focusing on, because it's just been rising.
How are we going to stop the vape epidemic, you think?
So we're hoping to combat it with our new curriculum. It's all research and evidence-based. We're putting officers in the classroom and really hoping just to spread awareness and educate students so they can make better decisions.
When did you first begin your formal drug education?
So I, first had the D.A.R.E program in 5th grade, and
I noticed that as we talked, there was a shirtless, relatively nervous man staring at me from the distance. I figured this must have been her dad. You want to hop in here? Your dad looks pretty awesome.
Yeah, he used to be a D.A.R.E officer a long, long time ago.
There it is. It always shocks me how much we are products of our own upbringing to a certain extent. What year did you start off with the D.A.R.E program?
2003, I want to say. We were just seeing the start of opiates or the heroin epidemic coming back from the 70s.
You consider marijuana to be a gateway drug?
Yes, most certainly.
To what other drugs?
Every single one of them out there. So it's a way to get away from pain in life, pain in whatever trauma they've experienced. It puts them in a spot where they don't have to think about their reality.
So what do you think is a proper, healthy solution to deal with that, trauma?
I think the mental health end of things are a big thing. My belief is that's the root of the problem for all this stuff, and that needs to be the focus.
So you think like pretty intensive psychiatry?
Most definitely.
What do you think about some of the drugs the psychiatrists prescribe?
I think they overprescribe sometimes,
yeah.
And that throws the mental health even farther off.
One of my goals as of recent is to find common ground with people I fundamentally disagree with. And I do agree that schools have a responsibility to provide mental health services to their students, especially in cities like New Orleans, where many students, especially children born after 2005, bear the weight of intergenerational trauma that affects how they behave, the choices they make, and their rational thinking skills. But I disagree with the notion that all young people who choose to do things like smoke weed are doing so to escape some kind of harsh reality, or to cope with some kind of unresolved trauma. And I don't think it makes sense to treat drug users like they're mentally ill people who are in need of immediate psychiatric intervention. It seems like an ancient way of thinking, reminiscent of D.A.R.E's past, that ignores the most important piece of understanding, which is that getting high can be fun sometimes, especially when you're younger. It makes food taste better, it can make you sleep better, and can provide a lot of creative inspiration. But still, I suppose that even claiming to prioritize mental health is still a massive step forward for D.A.R.E.
Who's this guy?
This is Alex Mendoza from Irvine, California, 2022 D.A.R.E Officer of the Year, a highly influential figure in the modernization of D.A.R.E's curriculum, who's actively tried to shift the program away from its former scared straight model.
I've had plenty of parents at a D.A.R.E graduation that have come up to me and have said, "Oh, do you guys still show, a giant box full of drugs?" And D.A.R.E has shifted away from that. And D.A.R.E really is, for me, it's a philosophy of empowering kids with some tools to help them navigate some of those waters. So I do things in my class like self-compassion meditation, right? So you say things like, "May I accept myself as I am. I give myself all the love that I need." I do meditation with them in class. I talk about empathy, right? I talk about compassion.
Despite Officer Mendoza's revamped prevention model, he still operates from the belief that all drug use stems from deep pain.
I think that any drug use comes from some sort of pain. In my experience as a police officer, 30 years being a patrol officer, 12 of those working in the D.A.R.E program, a lot of that pain has been from some sort of family issue, some sort of abuse, something that's going on. So when you boil it down, it's not to heal, but it's really a form of escaping. And so for me, it's really about educating the youth that are out there to help navigate, give them the tools necessary to navigate whatever pain that they're going through. Could be a limiting self-belief. I've had kids in the past that believe that their parents don't love them, that they're a burden. And that internal dialogue then ends up causing them to, go to an external source to help deal with their pain. So it's that internal dialogue, right? And I think that if you don't have that self-love for yourself and that resiliency, then you're going to go to that external source, whatever that might be.
Do you feel the same way about alcohol?
Absolutely. I mean, alcohol is a gateway drug.
You don't drink?
I rarely drink, maybe once or twice within a month period of time. Once I started getting into, a vegan lifestyle, I realized that alcohol is not good for you. And so, when my daughter, if she's getting married. So, recently I toasted and had, like half of it, and that was the end of that.
He's like justifying.
It confused me that Officer Mendoza had such conviction in his own ability to moderate alcohol and recognizes its recreational, celebratory function, but seems to harbor the opposite opinion about all drugs deemed illegal. Do you feel that, marijuana could be treated the same way, like semi-recreational, not necessarily a gateway drug?
There's so many things about marijuana that go far beyond, like, I guess our understanding, right? From a lot of the statistics that are out there, obviously, they say that it can be more dangerous than tobacco products. I know that there's people out there that say that marijuana could be used to treat people that have some sort of illnesses to help them navigate and deal with that. I think the problem that you run into is that you have the people that truly legitimately have a need and a purpose behind it, and will use it to help them navigate their pain. My brother-in-law recently passed away of cancer, and he didn't want to go with any type of prescription medication. He wanted something natural, and he resorted to using THC to deal with his pain. And
don't say marijuana, call it THC.
Away, but it helped them navigate that, right? And then you have, unfortunately, people that will use that as an excuse to try to use that product for recreational purposes.
Truth be told, I genuinely think Officer Mendoza has good intentions, but I don't think D.A.R.E can truly move forward unless it can accept the fundamental truth that drugs, for many people, can be fun and won't necessarily destroy your life, but they can. Anyways, as the conference wrapped up, the president of D.A.R.E, top dog Francisco Pegueros, gave a closing speech. To be honest, he was the man that I really wanted to talk to. A 4-decade D.A.R.E man who served as an eyewitness to D.A.R.E's genesis in the 80s, decline in the late 90s, and now I guess rebirth in the 2020s. But still, I was skeptical as to whether or not I could make it work. But I guess my mustache and reflective glasses worked wonders. And so, on the late afternoon on the final day of the D.A.R.E conference, I got President Pegueros to my hotel room for an exclusive one-on-one sit-down interview.
Well, thanks so much for making the time, man. I appreciate it.
First name is Francisco. Last name is Pegueros. P as in Paul, E-G-U-E-R-O-S. In a former life, 26 years with the Los Angeles Police Department. Currently the president and CEO of D.A.R.E America, D.A.R.E International.
Frank Pegueros is the president of D.A.R.E America.
The D.A.R.E program was started in 1983. I got involved in 1984. It was actually a year after the program was started. At that time I was a sergeant, so I wasn't rank eligible to teach the program because it was officers that were teaching the program in schools.
Throughout the 1970s, 80s, and up until the early 90s, until the LA riots of 1992, President Pegueros served as both sergeant and captain of LAPD's Rampart Division, the most controversial division in the department's history. Once depicted in the 1988 film Colors, and then later Training Day, The Shield, and the video game Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Rampart Division was tasked with looking after the MacArthur Park, Pico Union, Skid Row, Echo Park, and Koreatown neighborhoods of LA, to name a few. Areas which were, and mostly, are still rife with mostly Hispanic gangs like MS-13, 18th Street, Temple Street, Echo Park Locos, and beyond. At Rampart, Pegueros worked under the authority of Captain Daryl Gates, who actually came up with the idea of D.A.R.E. and architected a plan to implement D.A.R.E. in inner-city schools, despite the LA City Council refusing to give it funding.
And we will do everything in our power to put the gang members where they belong.
The program within LAPD was an unfunded program. The chief at the time, Darrell Gates, didn't like to wait for the city budgetary process to catch up with his endeavors and visions. So there was an organization formed called the Crime Prevention Advisory Council, which was a lot of well-intended, well-to-do Angelenos who funded all of the LAPD's unfunded programs. D.A.R.E was one. The Special Weapons and Training was another program that was unfunded. Our mounted unit was not funded. A lot of crime prevention programs were not funded. So
this is where it gets insane, and there's basically no reporting on this. Because the LA City Council refused to fund Darrell Gates' ideas and allocate millions in taxpayer dollars to police programs like D.A.R.E, the Special Weapons and Tactics Team program, aka SWAT, and most controversially, a militarized gang unit program called CRASH. CRASH standing for Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums. Chief Gates had to think outside the box being the law, and so created a private corporation called the Crime Prevention Advisory Council, a deceptively named company ran by an executive committee of 72 wealthy citizen stakeholders that included physicians, entertainment and sports world dignitaries, economists, accountants, realtors, lawyers, developers, bankers, and insurance executives, who all agreed to fund Darrell Gates' dream, which was obviously to militarize LAPD and turn the city back into what it was in the 1950s, before gangs and drugs ruined everything. Darrell Gates somehow called the establishment of this corporation a community partnership, but it was a clever way of circumnavigating the checks and balances that city government is supposed to impose on its police department.
The instrumentation at LAPD has always been poor because the city council won't come across with a few bucks in order to provide that instrumentation.
And President Peguero's job in this whole equation was essentially to procure funding for Chief Gates by convincing rich private citizens to become stakeholders in the Crime Prevention Advisory Council.
Part of my duties were support, help finding funding sources to keep LAPD's various programs going.
Drugs. Some of the big kids do them. But my mom and dad helped get this D.A.R.E anti-drug program in our school.
Now, what was the purpose in creating the program in the first place?
It was, the legend goes that Chief Gates and the then superintendent of schools at the time, Harry Handler, were at an event and just having a casual conversation where they shared their observations about what they believed to be generational problems. LA really grew after World War II. That was probably the biggest growth spurt that we had. So after World War II, there was a certain percentage of people within the population that were, repeat problems for the police department. And as it turns out, the school district was saying it's kind of the same people.
These are no good, miserable sons of bitches that are plaguing the city, and we got to get rid of them.
Yes, LA grew massively after World War II, but specifically it gained over 300,000 new Black and Hispanic residents in just 10 years. Most of the Hispanics were coming from across the border from Mexico, whereas the majority of Blacks were coming from the American South in a mass exodus called the Second Great Migration, which we covered in our video about Philadelphia. Much like white Philadelphians, white Angelenos feared that having Blacks and Mexicans in their neighborhoods would in turn lower their property values, and so LA's majority white city council leadership voted to impose racial zoning restrictions that wouldn't allow Blacks or Mexicans to rent or buy homes in neighborhoods like Bel Air, Larchmont, Mid-Wilshire.
When was
Hollywood.
this?
These new groups of immigrants after World War II, who are now the majority in Los Angeles, were only really permitted to rent
50s
or buy
and 60s,
in
okay.
semi-industrial parts of town, like South Central LA, Boyle Heights, Echo Park, and other sort of random pockets of town, like Venice and East Hollywood, where these communities mostly remain to this day, though unfortunately, gentrification has corroded the once Hispanic Elysian Valley corridor, the once Black West Adams neighborhood proximal to USC, and led to the formation of new suburban low-income developments, which is the future of poverty in America, once reverse white flight has completed. But let's back up a bit. Between 1950 and 1980, white population in LA decreased from 94% to below 50% as the third generation of mostly Black and Hispanic Angelenos
That's a lot
reached
of people.
elementary school age.
And then their children, then in the 1980s, it was the third generation. And Dr. Handler and Chief Gates were talking about it, and it seemed that substance use was at the heart of a lot of those problems. I don't care if it was East LA or South Central LA or out in the valley, the kids were pretty much experiencing the same things. So at that point, they decided to develop an intervention program to be delivered at the elementary school to just try to break the cycle so that we didn't hit the fourth generation.
D.A.R.E hit LA schools in 1983 and mostly focused on inner city neighborhoods, where an LAPD officer would go into the school and give students tips on how to not do drugs and how to not join a gang.
Initially, the lessons were geared around information dealing with alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana. So the officer would go in once a week for 17 weeks and deliver the lesson.
The introduction of the D.A.R.E program had almost fascinating timing. When it began, the most popular drugs were PCP, marijuana, cocaine, and Quaaludes.
I don't even know what
but
PCP
only 3
is.
years after D.A.R.E's introduction, the crack epidemic began and
Thought it
made
was a
all
type
of
of
those
pipe.
drugs seem like child's play.
And I guess 85, is that when the crack epidemic started?
Yeah, 80s, yeah.
School boards and police departments from all across the country were
That's
panicking
PVC?
when crack hit
Right.
the streets,
Should've known.
trying desperately to figure out what they could do to prevent the next generation of students from smoking crack. And at the 1985 International Association of Chiefs of Police Conference in Houston, Texas, Daryl Gates spoke and informed 16,000 public safety professionals about the D.A.R.E program and its success in LA.
It was at a meeting of the major city chiefs, IACP, International Association of Police Conference, where Gates first mentioned the implementation of this program, and it sparked some interest. So there were requests from other law enforcement agencies and school districts, and it was so well received that through word of mouth, it just started to be imported and exported to other communities.
After receiving the support of Ronald and Nancy Reagan, D.A.R.E pretty much went nationwide, and within 7 years was present in 95% of all public elementary schools.
Let's go back to the 80s. Did you ever meet Nancy or Ronald Reagan?
Yeah. Actually, we took Nancy on a ride-along when I was with LAPD. And the Bushes, the Bushes and the Clintons would actually come to classrooms. Chelsea Clinton was a D.A.R.E graduate.
As their budget increased, D.A.R.E spent a ton of money also producing cool commercials, cartoons, and most importantly, high-budget production called Safety Tips that was originally pitched by a young man from San Luis Obispo named Bill Russell, a.k.a. Retro Bill.
And I said, hey, let's make this thing, part of the 21st century, and we'll turn it into a really cool video. And then ultimately Retro Bill became the D.A.R.E Safety Tips DVD. And I kept telling my crew I wanted this to have a shelf life of 20 years. Now, again, that's big because they were like, dude, you really think we're gonna make a safety video that 20 years from now kids are still gonna watch? I said, yeah, because it's gonna be fast, it's gonna be fun. And even then, 20 years ago, that was like the fastest thing going. Yeah. And my editor said, Retro, are you really going to put a sound effect in for every single move that everybody makes? And it's like, yeah, you bet.
Cigarettes, cigars, chewing tobacco, marijuana.
Because again, I felt that if you can get their attention orally.
Hot diggity dog. I'm out of here. It's right on.
Right? Sound as well as visuals. And then you give kids this powerful, impactful message.
Never talk to a stranger in a public restroom.
Present it in a fun way.
Cool.
You can get really serious points across, and you've seen this.
Hey kids, it's Ad Read Andy here. Cool. You ever got a spam phone call or an email from God knows who trying to sell you some product or waste your time? It's because your personal data,
including your phone number, email address, home address.
It's actually
employment history,
TikTok,
and even social security number are being traded and sold by private
data brokers.
What? I mean, how the heck did those people get my number? But with Incogni, that can all go away.
No, yeah, but seriously, with a service called Incogni, you can go on the offensive.
With your permission, Incogni will essentially contact all these pesky data brokers on your behalf and get you the hell out of the system. That means no more spam phone calls, no more BS emails trying to sell you some shit you don't even need, homie. Oh yeah, if you go to www.incogni.com/channel5, you can sign up for a whopping, drumroll please, $7. 60% 60% off.
Oh.
That's right, www.incogni.com/channel5. 60% off. Cool.
It wasn't just about drugs. You also talked a little bit about graffiti.
Right. Well, anti-graffiti and anti-sticker on public property is a big passion of mine, and I'm known, if anybody goes to Retro Bill's social media pages, they will see that I regularly go out on the weekends or when I'm free and personally spray paint over, and I match the colors on those signs and those poles because I just find it offensive. And I believe as citizens, we all owe it to each other to not only look out for each other, but look out for your community.
You think graffiti is pretty bad, though?
I do. And it's gotten worse.
Tenderloin, but we all locked in over here, man. We got face car valid all through these trenches.
How come you think?
Why has it gotten worse? Because I don't think there's any accountability for it.
Shout out to D.A.R.E.
The Safety Tips DVD was just one part of the program's youth-targeted advertising campaign. D.A.R.E. also produced coloring books and fun pamphlets that taught kids how to do things like resist peer pressure and say no to drugs. At the conference, I picked up something that I personally remember reading when I was a kid that gave me 5 techniques to say no to smoking weed. I wanted to do a live demonstration with Retro Bill, the king of resisting peer pressure, to see what he would do in many situations that I was in as a kid.
Ooh, we're gonna role play.
Hey man, I see that you're looking pretty down. I got a bong in the car. Let's go out and get freaking wasted.
You think I look down? Bro, I do this and I'm grateful. I'm alive, man. You know, I fell out of a tree first day of summer a few years back. I was paralyzed from the neck down for 3 days. I tell you what, greatest high is when you can do this and you don't need assistance. Now I'll pass on the bomb, man. Besides, my mom, if I ain't home for dinner, I'm toast. I gotta go. Hey, peace, man.
I respect that.
Hey, you want to smoke?
No thanks.
Oh, I'm gonna go tell everybody that you are a chicken.
Well, that's okay, Paul, but that's something I don't want to do.
At what year was D.A.R.E. at its peak in America?
Probably the late 80s, and that's kind of when the negative research hit. Some of the research reflected that D.A.R.E. wasn't achieving the outcomes that the prevention community thought it should be achieving.
In the early 90s, a large multitude of studies came out showing that among the D.A.R.E. generation, drug use wasn't actually reduced.
So the 1992 sixth graders had D.A.R.E. The 1989 students did not have D.A.R.E. Right here we see daily use of cigarettes. 1989, 0. In 1992, 1%.
Drug, alcohol, and tobacco consumption appeared to be increasing. This could have been for a variety of social and cultural factors, but critics of D.A.R.E., in what Pagueros calls the prevention community, pointed at D.A.R.E. and said, what's the point of funding this to the tune of $700 million per year when it's not really working?
The prevention community perception was that if you don't prevent it from happening, if you don't prevent a person from using, your program hasn't been effective. I think it's pretty well accepted now. If you can delay the onset of experimentation, you decrease the probability of that individual developing an addiction. If you can prevent a 16-year-old from experimenting until they're 19, they're probably going to have less of a problem with it. They're going to find out when they're 20, 21 that I don't need it. Whereas if they're starting at 14, 15, 16, not that easy for them to make that decision.
Doobies all day long at 420.
But how much is too much? And if you stop, can the brain reverse the damage?
Yeah, the medical field has determined that your brain doesn't fully mature until about 25th year. You know, the frontal part of the body, the one that deals with all the rational decision making, is the last part of the brain to develop, and it's not developed until your mid-20s. It's all the other, the pleasure centers, all that stuff developed first.
Yeah, I have pretty severe brain damage from experimenting with psilocybin mushrooms when I was 12, 13.
I personally began drug use quite early in life, but never really proceeded to do drugs like benzos or opiates, mainly because my experience when I was 14 acquiring a condition called HPPD from using psilocybin mushrooms scared me away from the life of hard drugs in favor of alcohol and stuff like that. But I do think that either way, even if I'd been told about the dangers of drugs, I probably still wouldn't have listened. But anyways, that's just my opinion. I think that people have to learn for themselves and figure out what works for them. But that's not the main purpose of my conversation with Pagueros. Almost everyone that I talk to who doesn't like D.A.R.E. sees D.A.R.E. as a direct extension of the
So what we need to do is we need to send all of these kids on a really, really bad acid trip at a really young age. That will overall send them in the right direction. Just a bad acid trip. Like, fuck it. Nightmare, you know, like one of those.
I wondered how he felt about the war on drugs, looking back at an objective failure.
A lot of people are critical of the war on drugs overall.
Well, there was some evidence that certain governmental agencies were involved in a lot of activity that were kind of contrary to the whole concept of the war on drugs. So.
Are you talking about like the CIA giving crack to Freeway Ricky Ross?
Yeah, it's an unfortunate part of our history, but evidently it's reality. Lower economic communities, minority communities have been targeted by the tobacco and liquor industry. The substances that can cause harm that are commercially available are more available in minority communities than other communities.
Looking back, what are your thoughts on the whole Reagan-era war on drugs overall?
Yeah, it's necessary. It should be a comprehensive effort. You can't take a program, D.A.R.E., and present it only to an elementary school student in the 6th grade. You know, there needs to be a follow-up intervention, whether it's middle school, high school, and it needs to be present in all the environments with that student's going to engage. If they're involved in the YMCA, if it's at the mall, the community needs to let those students know we're supporting your decision not to be influenced if you don't want to be, to get involved.
So what is D.A.R.E. in 2023?
Completely different than it was in 1983. The original curriculum, the officer went in for 45 minutes and just talked, gave a presentation. With the new curriculum, the officer probably spends 7 or 8 minutes talking. The students in small cooperative learning groups take that information and apply it to what they perceive as challenges in their life on a day-to-day basis.
In the new D.A.R.E. classrooms, an officer will give a very brief lecture, and then students will divide into 7 to 8 person small groups where they'll have a sheet listed that presents a variety of situations that may be somewhat risky, such as someone asking you to smoke a blunt after school, someone asking you to join the Crips, or a variety of other situations that could put the student in danger. Then the group will come up with what they would do and decide on a consensus, present the consensus to the D.A.R.E. officer, and receive feedback.
I think it's more challenging for the officers. If you were an officer with the old curriculum, after you presented the lessons 3 or 4 times, that you kind of had the script memorized. With the curriculum as it stands now, every class is different. It's not an information dump. It's not a drugs are bad. You've got choices. You just need to slow down. You need to, weigh what's presented to you, and decide, what the alternatives are and which ones are best for you.
Is there any particular challenges in the modern era that are kind of new and unprecedented?
Currently we're facing the issues with the rise in fentanyl use, and a lot of legislative bodies are mandating educational components be provided to students. Texas last month mandated that every 6th grade through 12th grade student each year receive fentanyl training.
In D.A.R.E. classrooms in Texas and Oregon, students are instructed on how to apply Narcan to someone's nostril, how to use their knuckles on someone's sternum to reverse an overdose, and a variety of techniques for...
Knuckles on your sternum to reduce an overdose? I've never heard of that. What? It wakes them up? Because it fucking hurts? Yeah, I just did it to myself and it's like, it doesn't feel good. It wakes them up. It stimulates nerves. Wow, okay. Interesting.
Identifying fentanyl, a cause which President Pagueros believes is of the utmost importance.
Unfortunately, with fentanyl, it's not a scare tactic. It is actually a one-time use can be fatal. And now it's being laced with other drugs. So fentanyl can be treated with Narcan, but some of the other drugs that it's being laced with now aren't opioids, so the Narcan's not working. So,
what do you think about like harm reduction supplies?
Narcan and stuff, I
in
guess?
many cases, it gives us the false perception that that regardless of your use, you're going to make it through. And unfortunately, last year, the year before, over 100,000 people each year in the U.S. have died from opioid use, most of it associated with fentanyl. And for those people, there is no positive outcome.
Harm reduction is supplying clean needles and supervised injection sites. I see. So basically helping people do drugs safer. It's like, what is the best? There's no perfect answer, I guess. I don't know.
You see a lot of programs use reformed addicts, and it's like you're giving the impression, okay, they made it out of it. I can do the same thing. I can use for 5-10 years, then I'll just stop. Unfortunately, for some people, there is no just stopping, or unfortunately for many, it can be a fatality before that came into play. So.
Looking back, do you feel like D.A.R.E has been a success?
Yeah, I've seen it be a success. And again, I've been around the program and the officers for 25 years. I get to go back to these schools, and I get to see adults now coming up with their own children. Not, again, goosebump moment for me, not only saying, Retro Bill, I know you'll never remember me, but I saw you speak in 5th grade. You changed my life. Man, you helped me get back on that positive channel. These were my kids. Man, I'm so glad I went through your D.A.R.E program. Because, man, I'll tell you what, I used those D.A.R.E lessons when I got into high school. That, to me, shows me, without getting into all sorts of research and the numbers they've done and showing, graphs and all that
I don't know about
the
that.
effectiveness of the program, firsthand. Like if somebody goes, is Retro Bill impactful in his work? Yes. Talk to anybody that knows me or has worked with me and been around me, they will tell you. I've been there as a deputy in the room right now, is a friend of mine who's been bringing me to her schools for 22 years, and she can tell you right now that I was approached by a 22-year-old girl, it's talked about at the D.A.R.E conference just a few weeks back, who was, as I was going into a restaurant for dinner with friends.
I'm going to pee during this.
And this girl, so cute with green and purple hair, she got up from her group of friends and she's like, Retro Bill! And she comes running over and she threw her arms around me. And she goes, I'm sorry, I'm just so excited to see you. And I'm like, wow, what's your name? Tells me her name, Molly. And you're never going to remember me, but you came to my school when I was in like 5th or 6th grade. And my life was in ruins. My parents, drug addicts, sibling in jail for drugs. I ended up being the only person in my family that's graduated even high school. You showed up when I was so low. I was going to kill myself.
I'm glad they bleeped
You
that.
gave me a chance to live because you motivated me and you let me know that I'm okay just being me. Because I was being made fun of for my hair and the way I laughed, and people knew my home life was a mess. Then Retro Bill came in, and I'm still here. So I said, what are you doing next week? Would you like to come and be a part of my family show that I'm doing at the local theater? And she's like, are you kidding? Yes. And she got to tell me more of her story. And again, I can go to moments like that where it's like, I know I made an impact in a positive way on a human being's life. Right there, right? And, you often hear people say, we can change one. Well, help one person, change one life, help one person get sober, or not go down that path of trying something that's destructive. We've made a difference.
Okay, but 750 million in taxes per year.
You impact one person in a positive way.
One is a small number.
And friends, and people they interact with. And guess what? That positivity is going to grow. Your positive work you do, you show it to a certain group, then they're going to tell somebody else about it. They tell somebody else about it, right? I love getting goosebumps. But that's how it works. When did you start to get into doing the work you're doing?
Journalism?
Doing documentary, yeah.
I went to college in New Orleans for documentary film.
But who turned your life around for you?
I had a teacher in high school named Calvin Shaw, who was like this super cool, I think he was like in his early 30s, which was pretty young for the average age range of the teachers. Right. He was my journalism professor, and he would let me actually leave the school to go cover like different events that were happening in the city. Like I remember I would hang out at Occupy Seattle and like do interviews inside the tent city, and I would go interview juggalos who were ICP fans at this place called Westlake Center, which is like a kind of sketchier downtown area. And he said, all you have to do is write a story by the end of the day, and I'll mark you as present. So I was considering dropping out of school when I was in 11th and 12th grade because I just didn't like it and didn't like the structure. But I graduated because of him.
I went to such a nice school. This is crazy to me.
To study journalism in New Orleans for all of college. So it all came down.
I've got to be so privileged because First of all, I went to a private Christian high school, but let's assume I did go to public school. The school I would have went to, I don't know if there could have been a single person in my grade who wasn't going to graduate high school. Like, that's not some crazy achievement. But I'm like watching this, I'm like, was that the only school that existed where that was like normal? Rich? Is rich school problems? I don't know.
One teacher.
But I love hearing you say that, and that's why I asked, because it shows one person can change someone's life.
Yeah, without that teacher, I wouldn't be doing this interview. I wouldn't have had a career.
Take the private school out of it.
Tell him.
If I went to Westwood, that's the high school I would have went to,
like,
which is a public
thank
school.
You, man, for helping me, and he says it was all you. He's like, I didn't do anything but let you go do some interviews. I was like, bro, you have no idea how much you helped me.
Maybe there's been a coach, a teacher, a counselor, a grandparent, a mom or a dad, a police officer.
What is he doing? The snapping again?
The same sort of messaging, positive messaging, right? Uplifting, informative messages to somebody just hasn't resonated. Didn't click. Retro Bill shows up.
Channel 5 live worldwide, Hollywood and Vine. Fuck the authority. Channel 5.
Interesting. Top comment. Let's see it. I've been sober from drugs and alcohol for 3 years now, but 15 seconds of Retro Bill snapping his fingers made me want to use it. God damn it. Classic. So Hades 2. Can I have access, please? I've been waiting. I'd like to play. Shit. No access. Feels very bad. Feels bad. Ugh. All right, let's do a Noida run, I guess. Or I could try those new games. I kind of want to try those new games that I haven't played. Hang on. Let's try 9 Realms. This is an early access, costs $6. Might not be good. In fact, it probably isn't, but hey. Play it anyways.